And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports Podcast. And if you are watching, yes, it is still me. I have cut my hair and my beard. My wife does not like it yet. We'll see how that goes. Carlos, let's turn it over to you. How are you doing in this new year now?
I'm doing well. The year is 2024. The date is January 4th. It's a Thursday night. We're here a little later than usual, but James, frankly, there's not a lot of Rowdies news to talk about. I mean, we were talking with you earlier. Like, what are we going to talk about? There's plenty of other, moves happening around the league.
Oh, yeah.
For the Rowdies after R3 offseason signings. There hasn't been much else to talk about, honestly. We still only have one goalie on the on the roster, which is a little concerning at this point in the year. But I'd love to hear your take on our signings in just a second. But yeah, other than that, James, the day's going well. I opened Twitter this evening to find out about a Tampa themed sandwich shop somewhere in South Korea. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but I opened up Twitter and there's some sort of sandwich shop in South Korea, Tampa themed. One of the first shots in the video is this flag that says Tampa Bay, City of Champions. There's the Bucks logo, the Rays logo, the Lightning logo, and then the Tampa area soccer team's logo. But it's not the Rowdies, it's the Tampa Marauders. For the soccer sickos out there, I'm sure you probably haven't even heard of these folks. I know they were like in the NPSL, and I think they dissolved in like 2015. I have no clue what they're doing on this flag in South Korea, but it was probably the most random thing I've ever seen. I'm really happy I came across it because I've been hysterically laughing at it for like an hour, and I felt like it had to be talked about, so I'm mentioning it here. If you want to see what I'm talking about, it's on my Twitter at CarlosTP810. It's insane. It's insane. It's so funny that there's a Tampa Marauders logo somewhere in Seoul, South Korea. So give that a look. Anyway, other than that, James, my day's been going pretty well. Been laughing at that again for like an hour. What's going on in your life?
Yeah, I haven't had any new sandwich shops pop up. I would love to know how that happened, like who it was that came across Tampa and if they've been to the area or if it's just like the way that I look at Buenos Aires and I'm like, oh, I would love to visit there someday or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, that's a little weird. To bring it back to the soccer, though, we do have a lot to cover, as you said. Not much of it is related specifically to the Rowdies, but there's a ton going on not only in the world of soccer, but also in the USL. And I think that we should get on to a lot of that today because there is still stuff to be watched if you are a soccer fan. And there's plenty to know about, even if you are a Rowdies fan who does not have any news specific to your team out right now. So we'll hop into that. But before I do want to say, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. And of course, subscribe to us on any major podcast platform if you want to listen to us, and follow us at RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, any social media that you are on. We will be there too with that handle. So Carlos, to get us started from news or in news from around the soccer world is what I mean to say. There are a couple of tournaments coming up here in the international arena, and I figured that we should touch on those just because they are, in my opinion, pretty cool. And if you are a soccer fan, then I would imagine this is something that would interest you, even if you do not have, too much interest in watching something outside of the Rowdies. I still think that this might catch your fancy because I wanted to hit on this before we actually get into the tournaments. But something to keep in mind here is that the Men's World Cup at this point is only 30 months away. That will be happening in the United States as well as Canada and Mexico. So if you are interested in seeing potential future stars coming up, because these two tournaments that are happening in January and February, this is where somebody is going to make their team for the long term because of their performance at this tournament, and then they will become a star at the 2026 World Cup. That's going to be the case. We just don't know exactly who it is. So let's get started here with the African Cup of Nations. That tournament, obviously, will be taking place in Africa and specifically in the Ivory Coast, and it will go from January 13th to February 11th. There are obviously a lot of big stars coming up there, like Mohamed Salah and other players, including every Nigerian striker out there. I guess they are all over the European soccer world. Like there's Victor Osimhen, there's Victor Boniface. I'm forgetting some other ones here, but yeah, there are a ton of great players for all of these teams, and you will be able to watch that on BN Sports. So if you have a
Yep.
BN Sports connection, there you go. Something that I wanted to point out for all of the soccer fans out there. Like I said,
That'll be a great tournament. I know there's so many good teams out in Africa already, but like the team that I think, just not knowing a ton about the African Cup of Nations historically, I feel like the team that we have to watch out for is Morocco. Just they're
right?
off that
Yeah.
incredible World Cup run. I can't imagine that they're going to come off and just play terribly in the AFCON. So that'd be really cool. Keep an eye out for them. Senegal is always probably, right now, I think Senegal is probably the best team in Africa. Is that a hot take? I
No,
don't
I
know.
think I think on paper they're probably right up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So odds are they're probably the favorite to win, but yeah, tons of great matches out there. And yeah, like you said, coming up soon, January 13th, it kicks off Bean Sports. I'll be tuning in. So honestly, like I didn't even know that was going on. So thank you, James, for putting that on my radar. But if you're listening to this, absolutely be sure to tune into that. Tons of great matches coming up there. I know we're desperate for soccer content. The Rowdies aren't playing. I need something to fill my.
Hey, maybe it's also a good little place for scouting some players if there are any Rowdies coaching staff listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, we've only made 3 official offseason signings, and we've lost one of the guys we supposedly re-signed. So
Yeah.
I think now's a good time to keep an eye on that on the scouting stuff for sure.
Yeah. And just to highlight Morocco one bit more, a player that is of interest to me for Morocco is a guy named Amir Richardson, whose dad's name is Michael Sugar Ray Richardson, a former basketball player. He grew up, I guess, in France. That's Amir Richardson, his son, and he was eligible to play for the U.S. I don't believe that he is now, but we missed out on that guy. He might be 6'6", something close to that. He's a defensive midfielder. So yeah, there are just a lot of interesting players out there, and I'm kind of annoyed that we didn't get him for the U.S. men's national team. But I guess we can't get everybody that I would like to all the time. But yeah, so that one was one that I wanted to highlight. Another one is the Asian Cup. Now, this is not the Asian Cup of Nations, although it is pretty much the equivalent. The men's Gold Cup in America is going to be, the North American equivalent, or the Euro. That's the same thing in Europe, and I believe that those are taking place both this summer. Either way, AFCON and the Asian Cup will be in January and February. The Asian Cup specifically will be January 12th through February 10th, and it will be hosted in Qatar following their World Cup hosting in not over a year ago now, because time is very weird. That one will also be available to watch for American fans, and specifically on Paramount Plus. Now, I think that
Nice.
one is one that more people have than BN Sports, but I do think that there are other ways to get around getting to BN Sports, and possibly people who have Fubo TV. I'm not entirely sure,
It's on
but
Fubo. It's on
yeah,
Fubo.
okay, perfect. So I have another way to try and get in then. But yeah, those are two big tournaments coming up here. Obviously, a lot of big stars in AFCON. There are going to be similar stars in the Asian Cup. You think of Sun Heung-min for South Korea. There's going to be probably a very big resurgence for the Saudi team, because they're just making a bigger push into getting into soccer. And I think that the international level is going to be the first place that they really try and break in there. Obviously, there's
Sure.
going to be a lot of money that is put into that game. There's going to be a lot of money that's put into those clubs. So you'd think that the Saudi team is going to want to do well here and kind of stand out a little bit. They're obviously going to have trouble playing other teams like Iran and Qatar and whatnot. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Australia also is coming off a very good men's World Cup, where they made the round of 16 and almost, did some damage against Lionel Messi's Argentina. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of big stars, I think, going to be at both of these, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Who's your favorite to win the Asian Cup, James? Give us your prediction right now.
All right. I'm going to say probably it's going to be Japan. I think that Japan
Yeah.
are extremely strong on the Asian side. It's harder for them do the same thing at the Men's World Cup because that includes so many teams from Europe and South America.
Yeah.
But I think that they are hands and away the best infrastructure in Asia. And they also have a very sprawling team right now. I should point out that one of their strikers at this tournament is not the leading striker for Celtic in Scotland. He was, I guess, was deemed not good enough to make the Japanese team because they brought other players from Celtic, but they didn't bring Kyogo Furuhashi. So it's just, yeah, it's very interesting what level Japan sees themselves at. And they are my favorites, at least.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I mean, we're talking about it being hosted in Qatar. I don't know how much of a home field advantage that actually is for Qatar as a country and as a team. I know they're the current champions, by the way. Fun fact. So who knows? Maybe they can use the home field advantage, quote unquote, to their advantage
Quote
and
unquote.
pull out the title. I don't know.
Maybe some heat.
Yeah. Having been over there November 2022, it was actually pretty solid atmosphere. I was really impressed by that. Some good fans that make a lot of noise, but I don't know if the talent on their squad would be enough to, put them over the line against someone like Japan, against a really good team like you're talking about, like Australia too. So that'll also be a great tournament to keep an eye out on. Paramount Plus should be a fun one.
Yeah. And with that said, I have one more tournament that I want to hit on before we get back to the USL, and that is the 2024 CONCACAF W Cup. So as I had already mentioned, the Men's Gold Cup is the equivalent of the Asian Cup, the AFCON, the Euro in North America, and we are hosting the Copa America. So I apologize. The Men's Gold Cup is not happening this year. That is an off-year tournament. This year, though, is the first Women's Gold Cup. So CONCACAF is now hosting the W Gold Cup. And to spread it out and get a little more quality in here, they have invited a couple of teams from South America as well. So I don't know if that's going to be a regular thing going forward or not, but at least in this inaugural edition, they are doing that. There will be 3 groups of 4 teams each, and then the top 2 teams will all qualify to the next round, as well as the 2 best third place teams, and that will give them a quarterfinals to whittle down. In the first group are the United States, Mexico, and Argentina. The second group are Brazil, Panama, and Colombia. The third group are Canada, Costa Rica, and Paraguay. Now, you recognize that in each of those teams, I only said 3 groups because there are 3 teams that still need to take their spots at this tournament. And with that, there will be 3 preliminary games: Haiti versus the Puerto Rico women's national team, El Salvador versus Guatemala, and Guyana versus the Dominican Republic. Now, you might recognize Haiti, the United States, Brazil, Canada, Costa Rica, Mexico, Panama, Colombia, Argentina, all teams that went to the last Women's World Cup. There is also one team that did not make it. That's Jamaica. Unfortunately, with the Jamaica women's national team, they were protesting the fact that they are not getting promised bonuses based on their performances in prior tournaments, including, I believe, the World Cup. And that's obviously very unfortunate. But with their protest, the Jamaican women's national team did not actually qualify for this one, despite them having several extremely good players, Bunny Shaw up top. They were not there. So Jamaica did not get through the qualification process, and they will not make it. Haiti could make it, although they obviously still need to beat Puerto Rico to do so. And that would be another team that is kind of up and coming. It's obviously a really interesting story that the country of Haiti is doing so poorly because of everything that has gone on there, including natural disasters, including man-made disasters that the U.S. has had no small part in. But we are looking at what is a very talented women's team in Haiti. And it's interesting that, they seem to be able to produce these players despite everything, I guess.
Yeah.
And, I wonder how they're going to do if they can make it to this tournament. Like I said, they will have to get past Puerto Rico to do so. And I do not want to spoil what we've got coming up, but stay tuned next week. We do have something interesting coming up related to this W Gold Cup. And I'm not going to give any more information away than that because it's going to be very cool.
Yeah, for sure. Man, that stinks about the Jamaican team though. Like they put up such a great performance at the Women's World Cup.
Yeah, they did.
Like really out of nowhere. I don't think anybody was expecting too much from that team. They ended up knocking Brazil out of the tournament. So that's a Brazilian team that's probably going to be really hungry to, I guess, kind of get back to their spot as
Right. Yeah.
sort of the top of women's soccer internationally. I'm really curious to see what they'll be able to do, or maybe if the team's just not in a great spot right now, could open the door for Colombia to put up a really, really good performance in Group B. And if you're watching the Women's World Cup at all, a few months ago, that Colombian team was really special too.
Linda Caicedo is going to be one of the best players.
Exactly. Caicedo is so fun to watch. She is, how old is she, James? Hold on, let me fact check myself. I know she is really young, which is insane. She was scoring bangers and she's 18 years old. Signed to Real Madrid, the women's team over there. It's incredible what she was doing. I think she was nominated for the FIFA Puskas Award.
I think so, yeah.
Which is really, really cool. For an 18-year-old to be doing that, it's awesome. So she put that entire team on her back at the World Cup. I'm really, really curious to see what she's able to do at the Gold Cup. Yeah, this is just out of curiosity, James. I'm not sure. You think you might be a bit more well-versed in this than I am. Do you know where the nearest game is to us local Tampa folk here? Where could we go catch a game? Because it's going to be hosted in the U.S., right?
It is hosted in the U.S., and it's a very weird location. I was hoping to be able to catch some games. I don't know exactly how we're going to possibly do that because they are in 3 cities in Southern California and then also Houston. So I don't know how Houston snuck in. If you're just going to have like a California tournament, you'd think that maybe you could go to Las Vegas or Phoenix or even, I don't know, San Jose, somewhere else in California. But it's just weird that Houston was the other one, but that's the closest one for any of us. If anybody wants to go out to California, you might just be able to catch a couple more games, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely a weird selection process.
How random. Yeah, I just looked it up right now. Carson, San Diego, LA, and Houston. Kind of out of nowhere popping up in there.
Yeah.
That'll be a good tournament for sure, though. Something for everybody to keep an eye on. Tons of great content coming out of there, too.
Yeah, I am looking forward to all 3 of those tournaments. I'm going to try and catch them or catch as much of them as possible. I don't know exactly how I'm going to fit that into my schedule, but we're gonna see, possibly some late nights and what have you.
Absolutely.
That's the nature of the game.
Absolutely. That's the nature. That's the day in the life of soccer sickos like you and I, James. Here we are, Thursday night. We're talking about the world of soccer. There's no Rowdies news, and we're still talking about soccer on a Rowdies podcast. We're sickos, and I'm sure everybody listening to this is as well. You absolutely should be tuning into those tournaments. It'll be great stuff coming up.
Absolutely. And before we get to the USL news that is more closely related to the Tampa Bay Rowdies, I do want to say liking and subscribing is free, but if you think you might need some new threads coming up for this new year, hey, guess what? We've got some new designs out there at the RBLR Sports Shop. Please head over there and you can support our podcast a little bit more by checking out shop.rblrsports.com. There will be a link in the description naturally, and we will have a promo code for you to get something and get 10% off of that if you would like. That is COYR. If you want to pay full price, I guess you can, but I would assume most people want to pay at least 10% off, if not more. So COYR, and check out our shirts and other stuff, other merch that we have up at the shop.
Pay full price if you want.
If you want.
No, if you just want to donate extra, go for it. James, I was thinking about a funny transition. I couldn't think of anything. Let's talk about the USL. All right. We talked about all these interesting tournaments coming up. Lots of fun stuff coming up in the broader world of soccer. For our USL sickos, though, there's so much to talk about. I mentioned we talked a little bit about kind of the big, trades, transactions, free agency stuff, moves happening in the world of USL with Ryan Davis last week. Something we didn't talk about, though, James, Oklahoma City Energy. Are they coming back? What did you see about this? I saw something about a report that was linking them with a new stadium, or at least a new stadium site.
Yeah.
I know they had been trying to figure that out for a while, but there hadn't really been any progress on that front, at least publicly. Kind of out of nowhere, this report popped up. What did you see about that, James? Because that could be pretty big for the world of USL.
Yeah, I saw the same reporting that you did, obviously. So Oklahoma City Energy, unfortunately, have been on hiatus, I think, for 2 years now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And the reason, supposedly, is that they have not had any luck in finding a suitable stadium site. I don't know how much goes into making a suitable stadium site, because I'm pretty sure other teams in the USL Championship have played in high school stadiums, at least recently. I
Yeah.
think that everyone is supposed to be working, quote unquote, towards getting a soccer specific stadium that they have regular access to. I don't know, like I said, what timelines people are supposed to be working on these stadiums for, but they didn't have one set up for themselves for the last 2 years. And we all thought that the team was effectively just going to go away, cease to exist like other ones have. But whoever
Yeah.
is behind it, they are not giving up yet. They have been
Good for them.
actually diligently working away at this for a little while. And supposedly they are about to buy some point of land in or around Oklahoma City where they can build themselves a stadium. I don't know, again, what the timeline is for that. I don't know how much money will go into it or whatnot. There's really not a lot of reporting about the plans, just so this early in the reporting. But
Yeah.
at the very least, they do have a plan to buy something where they can put up a stadium if that gets all the proper licensing and
Yeah.
approval and what have you. But yeah, that would be really interesting, because it would be good to have a team back that everyone thought was going to die. I think that has happened far too many times. And if we actually don't lose a team that everybody thought was gone, that's a great sign of health, not only for the USL, but for American soccer in general.
Absolutely. And Oklahoma City, that the squad, especially Energy, they've been building up a great fan base for years at this point. It was really unfortunate that they just kind of had to like randomly stop playing and figure out their whole stadium situation. They were averaging great numbers. I don't have it on hand right now, but they were certainly not like in the lower echelon of like attendance numbers or anything. They were,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, competing regularly. They were mid-table squad. This certainly wasn't a team that you would be like, oh, well, that makes sense that they're folding, right? I mean, there's always a couple teams that towards the bottom of the table don't really compete, don't really draw crowds, not to randomly take a shot at a team, but Miami FC is a squad that I am so surprised is still operating at this point, with kind of where they're at as a club. Um, Oklahoma City Energy was not one of those teams. So it's really, really good to see at least signs of life from that squad and that
Yeah.
club, because I think they have a very lively fan base that certainly wants their team to be back, obviously. It'd be great to have them back. So hopefully sooner rather than later. Like you said, it would be really cool to have a team essentially come back from the dead when everybody thought they were gone. We had that CJ Cochran guy on loan here for a year.
That
Supposedly
CJ
he was
Cochran
going,
guy. Yeah.
yeah. Supposedly he was coming, or he was going back to OKC Energy right after the season with us, and then nothing happened. So it's great to see that they're at least attempting to make a comeback, and I think everybody's rooting for them to do so.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up now, and CJ Cochran actually has not been with anybody since that season, I guess, since
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't hear anything back from the Rowdies about prior goalkeepers, maybe CJ Cochran is still out there available. But yeah,
He's out there. He's certainly out there.
that is something that I actually hadn't thought about or put together. Anyway, yeah, OKC Energy, hopefully they come back. CJ Cochran, maybe he rejoins the soccer world from wherever he was. And yeah, that would be interesting.
He was a
But
solid
to
goalie.
get
He
back
was
to
solid.
to get back to the USL here, going around the USL horn, as it were, we actually have some news that is related to someone from the Tampa Bay area, someone that I think everyone listening should be relatively familiar with. Darnell King, according to Phoenix Rising, is going to
Yep.
transition now into a coaching role with that team. So, yeah, very interesting stuff here that he is, I guess, hanging up his boots and going to be an assistant for Phoenix in 2024. Yeah, it
Yeah.
says raising the USL championship trophy over my head was an amazing way to cap off my playing career. Obviously, that does sound like a retirement. And
Yep.
he goes on, I've had so many great memories over the years with all my teammates and friends that have come and gone. The experience has been nothing short of amazing. I'm excited to transition into a coaching role with Rising to be able to stick around the game and continue doing something I love. I am so fortunate for what the game has given me over the years, and I can't wait to use that experience as a coach. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I think Darnell King is somebody that has a pretty big legacy through the USL league. Actually, he's played for a number of teams now, and done a number of very good things, including obviously winning the USL championship itself. So congratulations to him on a
Yeah.
very good playing career. And that is really cool that the first thing that you get to do as a coach is just join your own club and be
Yeah.
an assistant.
That's now two players that Phoenix, two former Rowdies players that Phoenix
Yep.
has taken and turned into a coach. That's pretty fun. It's cool that. Oh, well, let me fact check myself. I don't know. I don't know if Darnell King and Juan Guerra ever played together. It might have been really close, but I'm not gonna remember. Whatever. Long story short, two former Rowdies now on Phoenix's coaching staff. Pretty interesting stuff. I'm gonna say for Darnell King, I think he'll be a great coach. He always was kind of a leader on this squad when he was down here several years ago. It seems like I mean, yeah, like you said, ended his playing career on a really high note with the title. He was a guy that I had hoped kind of like just on a whim that the Rowdies would go out and pick him up, bring him back home, have him play a couple more seasons here. But hey, his playing career's over. It seems like he'll be a great coach. So congrats to him and congrats to Phoenix for keeping him there. Seems like a
Yeah.
really, really cool move.
Yeah, I would like to swing an interview there and see if I could use my old "we played together in high school" line. See if that really, if he even remembers that, honestly. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, congratulations to Darnell. I think that that is really awesome for him and his family, obviously, to be able
Yeah,
to
so
stay
cool.
settled, because staying settled as an athlete where you're supposed to be probably moving, especially at this level, like pretty much every offseason, that's got to be pretty cool.
Super cool. Super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, James. Plenty of other moves happening. Where do we start? Where do we start? I'm gonna start with the stuff from Charleston, by the way, just
Okay.
because Charleston is a really, really interesting team to me. Obviously, Lee Cohen's out there. He doesn't mess around. We know that. He's building an incredible squad. They
Yep.
obviously made it to the final last year. Everybody expected them to, well, not everybody. I guess Phoenix didn't expect them to, but I expected them. I think a lot of people expected them to end up beating Phoenix at
I did.
home and, yeah, claim that title. But they didn't, fortunately for them. Phoenix came in and put in a really, really good performance. Had a Rocco Rios Nova, I'm butchering his name, had an incredible game, and they lifted the title in Charleston. I think Charleston's mad. They're certainly not messing around this offseason. They have unfinished business because, as I mentioned last week, by the way, we had Aaron Malloy. We talked about him briefly. Fantastic, fantastic midfielder. Graham Smith going over there. Jake LaCava going over there. And Josh Dratt going over there. I mean, this is a squad that was already very, very talented. They lost a
Yeah.
few guys, but they have, I think, I would argue, the biggest signing of the offseason in Aaron Malloy going over there. That might be a hot take, but Aaron Malloy, I think, is just actually one of the best midfielders in the entire league,
I
if
agree.
not the best central midfielder. I mean, he's really young and at the same time, like, so he has lots of potential to get even better. It's an incredible, incredible signing. I want to get your take on this, James, because we talked a little bit about it with Ryan Davis last week. What do you think about this Charleston squad? Are they getting better with these signings, or are they just kind of maintaining their pedigree from last season?
No, I mean, I do think that this is an improvement over what was there. So if I'm pulling up the Charleston roster here now, obviously they did, like you said, they had a lot of very good players, and there are a couple that are missing that I don't see from last year. But let's just look at which players are still around. Chris Allen was a regular starter. Leland Archer, Fidel Barajas obviously is one of the best players in this league, and I'm sure he's going to be leaving relatively soon to go to some European academy. Nick Markanich was a very good player. Tristan Traeger, another very good player. Trey Muse is somebody that I was trying to reference before we actually got started recording here, Carlos, but he might be leaving to go up to MLS. And then Mark Zegbers is a wingback. So if you look at that, that's still a very good team. But I think that one of the bigger areas of concern, just looking at that roster, is center backs.
Yeah.
Graham Smith is a good center back to bring in. He has MLS experience, if I'm not mistaken, with Sporting Kansas City. Yeah, just a year, or a couple of years, but not as many appearances. Either way, that probably means he will be a good center back at this level. I think that that is something that they are going to want to fill in, and he's going to be able to do that. Aaron Malloy is going to be an update or an upgrade over almost anyone in his position across the entire league. He kind of plays as a central midfielder playmaker. You could think of him roughly as a quarterback. He does a lot of the, long passes to set plays up. And, I'm not sure that there are too many players in the USL who play the role the way he does that are going to be able to say they do it better. I really don't know who else you could get that's going to be able to get anywhere near Aaron Malloy. Jake LaCava, I think that last year he obviously did not have the year that we were all hoping for. But at the same time, we know from 2022 what he's capable of. Anybody can have a down season, and that happens all the time. Think of us in our day-to-day lives. We have off days even. It comes up just the same for professional athletes. And I think that Jake LaCava still has that potential in him. It just requires somebody to unlock it properly. And, he might have been down this year for any number of reasons. It's probably going to be, something a little bit psychological when you look at the Inter Miami roster that he was coming from. But, if he is given the proper confidence in him to get him going at the same rate he was in 2022, then obviously they have a great player on their hands. And when you look at how many wingers they have that are going to be really potential, game changers, Jake LaCava is there. Like I said, Tristan Traeger was very good for them. Nick Markanich was another player who's very good for them. And then Fidel Barajas, who will probably be leaving that team. If I had to guess, he turns 18 in April. So I'm going to guess he probably makes a move sometime in June or July. If they have Nick Markanich, Tristan Traeger, and Jake LaCava already when he's gone and, starting infrequently or around him, then that's obviously a very, very good base to have here. And I am very interested to see what Ben Perman does with this team again this year.
Man, if they can get 2022 LaCava out of Jake, like on top of all the other weapons they got going on right now,
exactly,
that's a really dangerous squad, and a squad that can very, very easily, not to say easily, that can very, very likely get back to that USL Championship final and kind of complete that unfinished business from last season for them for sure. I mean, it's gonna be really interesting. It's a squad that last year we saw wasn't really messing around. They were putting together a pretty good looking team. And I think they did, slightly better than I thought they were going to do. I wasn't expecting them to be like immediately championship quality. So I was really, really impressed with that club as a whole. And now having that squad, they lost a chunk of players for sure, but they kept a lot of their important guys. They're bringing in upgrades, like you said, at various different positions, and kept a lot of their other important pieces. So that's a really, really good looking squad. That's going to be a problem for us for sure. I want to stay on the East Coast too, James, just to highlight some other teams that I think are going to give us some problems. I think are going to be teams that compete for a title for sure. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Louisville City is always in the mix for sure. That being said, they had some of the more interesting departures this offseason. I think the highlight of that is Cam Lancaster, who is a absolute club legend for them. Played there forever. I mean, as long as I can remember. He's been at Louisville, scores a ton of goals, getting slightly older, but plenty of stuff left in the tank for him. He's out from Louisville. They hadn't renewed his contract. He's looking for a team, and I haven't heard about anything happening on that front about where he's going to end up. So that's going to be a really, really interesting piece that can score a lot of goals. That's out on the market, and nobody's picked him up yet. That being said, they did bring in Adrian Perez, who does score a lot of goals. He scored 10 goals last season. He's really, really good. More of an attacking midfielder, but I think he can kind of play as a striker. But they also brought in Arturo Ordonez, Tola Shawamni, key player that we haven't heard about them re-signing. I haven't seen him sign anywhere else, James. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Manny Perez. So lots of big moves happening over there. I'm going to pitch to you the same question, James. Louisville didn't really have the season that they always do last year. They're always it feels like they're always in the conference championship and always in the final at some point. That being said, what do you think about these signings, the moves, kind of the ins and outs of Louisville? Did this team get slightly better or slightly worse this offseason?
It's early to say, obviously, like you said, but I think Tola Shawunmi and Arturo Ordonez, those are two good players that they also take from a rival in Pittsburgh. So, that's kind of important on its own. And they didn't have the year that they would have wanted. Like you said, again, every year you're supposed to see Louisville in the conference final, at least, if not the league final. That's what their fans expect, quote unquote. And, I think that is one good way to make that step forward in doing that, because they need more center backs that are probably a bit younger. Not to say that the center backs they had were the problem at Louisville City, but if you can go out and get a quality player who's younger than the one you have, I mean, that's just a no-brainer. You should probably do that if the option is available. So I think Arturo Ordonez is going to be a better center back than what they already had, and
For sure.
so that is an upgrade, I would say. Tolo Shawunmi on his own is not going to be a game changer, but I think that he is going to be at least a good backup piece, and possibly a Cameron Lancaster equivalent for last year, because he wasn't the same player as he was the years before that anyway. So I'm not entirely sure, if they're going to rely on Wilson Harris or not. As you said, though, Manny Perez, he is being linked at this point with a move to a club in Denmark. That is what I saw from, I don't know if it was Tom Bogert, but it was someone, like Tom Bogert, Mr. Tommy Scoops there. But yeah, it's interesting that they might lose him. I don't know, who they have necessarily to replace him, if that's the idea, or if they're just going to stick with what they have. So that's kind of something that I see shaken out as impacting that team, because they obviously do like to attack down the wings. We know that they've always had quality wingers and wing backs, but yeah, I'm interested to see how that one goes with him specifically.
Yeah, speaking of like wingbacks and fullbacks too, they lost Oscar Jimenez, who's been there for a long time as well. Forgetting where he ended up, but I know he's not there anymore. Like you said, they took a couple players off Pittsburgh, who is a squad that hasn't signed anybody this offseason.
Yeah.
Am I mistaken? Like, I don't know what's going on over there. I think John from USL Tactics put it really funny that every offseason they lose a bunch of players and we always kind of underestimate what they can do. And then every offseason we're wrong. They always end up doing pretty well. They were one of the best teams in the conference last year and then kind of fell off towards the end of the year. Unfortunately for them, it felt like it could be their year, but it didn't last very long. First round did, unfortunately for them. Yeah, I have yet to see any movements in to Pittsburgh. Lots of movement out though, like we mentioned here. Another team building a really good team, kind of out of nowhere this offseason, Hartford, James. I want to talk about Hartford briefly as well, because they've been not great for a little bit now.
Yeah.
But the signing that I just saw today was huge. Romario Williams scores tons of goals. He was a guy that was on my wish list for sure, because it feels like he's just like guaranteed goal scoring machine. He's just consistent, exciting, very electric as a player, kind of fun to watch. That's a huge signing for them. I mean, they've been building a pretty decent squad with their new coach, Brendan Burke, already. I think this is kind of like the highlight of their offseason so far. I mean, they've signed a solid group of players. They're keeping their key pieces sort of from last year. There's not a ton of them. But Romario Williams coming in to reinforce that squad is going to be really, really interesting. And I think you could be looking at a whole new look for Hartford in terms of kind of like their level of competitiveness, and kind of like who they are as a club. I think that's going to be really, really interesting for them.
Yeah, I'm going through their roster here. I think that one of the biggest things that they need is going to be a good coach, and Brendan Burke is going to be a good coach for anyone at the USL Championship level. We have seen him have success at different times. We've seen him also, fail at different times, but that's what coaching is, pretty much no matter where you go. If you look at the rest of the team, though, it's very interesting. Anderson Asiedu is there, and he comes from Birmingham City. He wasn't playing towards the end of last season, and I asked Kaylor Hodges of the Hammering Down podcast before we played them in the playoffs what the deal was there. He didn't have any, information that we could use. So it was just interesting that he wasn't there, and to see him pop up somewhere else in the USL is kind of interesting. Overall, I'm not really sure what to make of that. But when you look at him and then you look at some of the other signings they've made, Deshane Beckford is another Jamaican attacking player. He is going to be someone who can probably partner with Romario Williams, but he's also got some pretty good pedigree in this league, and he has played with him, I believe, at Colorado Swing Switchbacks, if they were overlapping there. I might be wrong about that. Either way, they have other players too. Reese Buckmaster is a pretty good right back. Marcus Epps is a pretty good winger. And the other player that I would highlight someone that's very interesting to me is a goalkeeper named Reynon Ribeiro, who, yeah, signed with them in November. I remember this being one of the earlier signings.
Sure.
He comes to them from a club over in Saudi Arabia. And that club he joined when he left Sporting in Portugal. Sporting in Portugal is one of the top 3 teams in that country. He was a backup there. He was never the starter, but still, you obviously have to be a very good player to even make it to that level. When he
Yeah.
went to Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia, he didn't get at least any games that I can see. But this seems like a very potentially sneaky good move because, this is obviously going to be a player of some quality, but we just don't know what level he's still at. If he hasn't played that much from his time at Sporting and then in Saudi Arabia, who can say? But this I don't know where the hell they got in touch with him, but this could be a sneaky good move.
That's one of those really random off-season transfers we
It's
always see.
super random.
There's always a few of them, and last year we had one of them, Felix Schroeder.
Yeah,
This is
that
certainly
was
of them.
one. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, good for them going out there. I guess it's always fun to have some of those random ones because I don't know, when they pan out, you're a genius in the front office for finding them. So good for them.
Yeah.
I love seeing Thomas Van Kaziel in the conference. He was a really fun player to have when he was here for that short period of time. He'll definitely be a solid piece for them on their back line. But yeah, like you said, Marcus Epps as well on that squad is going to be really, really fun for them. They just have a really dangerous squad. Kind of Epps, throwing an assist to Romario Williams is going to be really dangerous for any team playing against them. This is not the same Hartford that was kind of a walkover for a little bit, to put it lightly. I think this is a team that competes.
Maybe they see Rhode Island like across the state line and they're like, shit, we got to step up our game a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another team. I think we can talk about them briefly now too. I mean, Rhode Island is a team that obviously out of nowhere, they weren't a team last season. They've had to kind of go out and make something happen. Usually with these offseason or with these expansion teams, you see, I don't know, a couple moves. They have one key player come in that kind of helps build the future of the squad. Like he's just kind of the guy the whole team rallies around at the beginning. But I mean, they are just going out and signing player after player. Obviously, it's like JJ Williams from us. They have Marky Barra, a fantastic central midfielder. Just plenty of really interesting names here that I think are going to be interesting to see how they gel, right? It's certainly gonna be a challenge for them to gel, like just bringing in all these different players from different teams. You don't really have anything to build on there because it's a new team, obviously. So I think it could take them a minute to kind of get going, but they certainly have the talent to, I'm not going to say compete for a title or anything, but I think they have the talent to be middle upper part of the table for sure.
Oh yeah, this is looking like a potential playoff squad.
Yeah, certainly a playoff squad, on paper. But again, I think it'll take them a minute to get off the ground and get their feet under them. Well, with it being a new team and all these players that don't really have much chemistry together at all because they're coming into a totally new environment. I'm really curious to see what they can do. I'm obviously not rooting for them to be champions because I want to be champions, but I'm kind of pulling for them in a way because I don't know. It's a really, really wild card of a team that I think can be. With the talent they have on paper, competing for top spot in the Eastern Conference. I think no matter what, they'll end up in the playoffs. But certainly in that kind of middle upper part for sure. I'm really curious to see what they can do.
Yeah, I would highlight their head coach being Cano Smith. Very interesting move there. Cano Smith is from Bermuda. He played in MLS for a long time for the New England Revolution, so I guess he's familiar with New England in general. But I don't know what that means for Rhode Island specifically, because they don't even play in Boston really. So it's kind of hard to say. But at the same time, he's got an interesting career as a coach. He was an assistant at a local college up there for a little while before he became assistant for the Orlando Pride. That's the women's team. And then after 2 or 3 years there, he went to Birmingham Legion as, did I say Birmingham City earlier? I think I did. He became an assistant at Birmingham Legion, not Birmingham City. That is the club in England that Wayne Rooney just got fired from because he's actually not that great a manager. Either way, Rhode Island have signed Cano Smith to be the manager. So we don't know what he's like as as the head manager
Yeah.
or head coach. We don't know what he's going to be able to do there. And just like with every club, I want to highlight at least one player here, and that one is Mark Doyle. Mark Doyle is the random weird signing at Rhode Island. So he is from Skerries, which is a part of Dublin in Republic of Ireland. He played for two clubs in the Ireland League, which is, very hard to determine exactly what level they're at. Jordan Doherty played a season there before he came back to us this past year on a permanent signing. And I think that he looked a lot better after, that one season. Was that directly related to his time there or more just related to him maturing? Who can say? I don't know how much information we could get from him specifically to talk about the level of the league here, but that's where Mark Doyle is coming from, is what I'm trying to get at. When he was at St. Patrick's Athletic, the last team he was at before moving to Rhode Island, he had 12 goals in 63 games, which doesn't stand out immediately, but he plays as a winger and a striker. So it sounds to me like they're getting a pretty quality guy here. And this is another one where I'm just like, where the hell did they get in touch with this guy? What, whose agent contacted whom here? Because it's very weird. I know that there's, maybe an Irish history in New England overall, not really necessarily Rhode Island itself. But I can't even speak to that. So it's just interesting that he wound up here, and I am, anxious to see exactly what type of player and team ultimately this is going to turn into.
Yeah. So many wild cards this offseason, and it's so early. We talked about this right before we started recording, James. This feels like a slightly different offseason with like how many quote unquote big moves we can point to.
Right.
I don't know what that says about the league. It's certainly a positive. It feels like there's a lot more parity. It's not really clear who the top team is anymore. In the past, you might just point to Louisville and say like they're going to win the Eastern Conference, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Tons of other Eastern Conference teams are going out, getting big names for the USL, and building really, really fascinating teams. Even North Carolina FC, who's coming up from League One, is putting together a pretty interesting squad. I don't think will compete for a title, but again, will certainly be in the mix for a playoff spot. They're not going to be a walkover, I don't think, by any means. And they signed one of my favorite Rowdies goalies of all time, kind of random, Akira Fitzgerald, who I think leads their squad or that club in goalkeeper appearances because he played for them before he came to the Rowdies for many, many years, even when they were known as the Carolina Railhawks.
Yep.
To this day, nobody really knows what that means, but he was on that squad. So really, really cool for him. It's cool that he gets to go back to his team now as a USL Championship squad. That's pretty fun. Any other teams to highlight here, James? Focusing on the Eastern Conference, obviously a bit more than anybody out west, because that's, I think, who is more relevant to listeners of this podcast. I feel like there's just a lot of different teams to keep an eye on here in the East.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, like you said, for us, we're going to play these teams more than we're going to play the teams out west. So that makes sense. But at the same time, there are a lot of very interesting moves going on in the Eastern Conference. And, there are going to be plenty of moves out west too. But I don't know that any of them have stood out quite to the same level. Ronaldo Damas has joined Colorado Springs Switchbacks. I think that's a good move. I think that's a player that Rowdies fans will know because of, the final that we did not win. But another player that signed with a team was Ethan Zubak for Orange County. That's a big move. He was one of the guys on my Christmas wish list. Unfortunately, we did not get him. So there are interesting moves going on out there. I know that Sacramento obviously is always going to be building something good.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, like you said, I'm just not as familiar, and none of them have really stood out quite the same. The only thing that I will point to right now is the same thing that John Morrissey brings up every year. We just don't know what the hell is going on with Las Vegas until like a week before the season starts. And then, they cobble together some team of all the guys who couldn't get a roster somewhere else, a roster spot somewhere else. And I hope that, I don't know how fans are supposed to latch on to this team, but I really hope someday there's something going on in Las Vegas that soccer fans can put their name on and say that they want to be a part of.
Yeah. First of all, they need to get the hell out of Cashman Field or whatever it's called. I mean, that place is really weird for soccer.
Wherever they go, take all the pitch side mattresses and swimming pools and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I don't if anybody's a sicko out there for sports in general, you probably saw that the XFL team in Las Vegas was also playing on that field. They were playing football regularly on that field. I mean, it's just I don't know. Like, do they not have anywhere else to play in the city of Las Vegas? I find that hard to believe. It's incredible. I don't know what it is about Cashman Field or whatever it's called that they
It's
love to
well
play.
off the strip. It's in a weird spot.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on over there. And yeah, it's a weird club. They got some weird vibes going on. I don't really know what to make of it. Gives me Tampa Bay Strikers vibes, but in
Yeah.
USL, like it's just weird. They throw in a llama out on the field every once in a while just cause like that's cool, I guess. But I don't know. Miami FC, by the way, James, I have nothing to say about them. I'm looking at John Morrissey's USL offseason tracker. They've lost like their entire squad. So they've been forced to go out and bring in a bunch of people. I'm really curious what this squad's going to look like. I mean, there's a couple interesting names out there that I'm relatively familiar with. You have Dalton Knudsen, the center back, who I believe is coming from Union Omaha. He had a pretty good season with them. I could be making that up entirely. Hold on, let me fact check myself. But other than that, like, there's a lot of names in this Miami column of signings and whatnot that I'm not really familiar with, and I'm kind of curious to see what they can do or if they do anything. I don't know where these guys are coming from. I'm really curious. I'm curious about how that club operates in general. Obviously, with Inter Miami down the road and kind of having to compete with the Messi marketing and whatnot. I don't know what's going on over there. I really don't. I think they're not going to be great just because they haven't been too great in a little bit. But hey, the USL is a wild card sometimes. There's certainly a few teams we can point to: Pittsburgh, Charleston, Hartford, the Rowdies, teams that are having like pretty good off seasons. They're bringing in a bunch of players, but I can't tell you much about any of these guys. Do any of these names look familiar to you, James? Are you looking at the same sheet I'm looking at?
Yeah, I know a couple of them just from watching or tracking international soccer as much as I can, but yeah, it doesn't stand out to me like it's a team that's really gonna do well this year. And I don't know. I think that there's definitely room in Miami for more than one team. I just don't know that the fans in Miami really care. And this is the only time that I'm ever going to like say maybe it's something to do with the fans of a certain city. But man, Miami fans are known for this in every sport. They don't like care unless a team is winning a championship. And that was true of Inter Miami up until Messi came. And then, obviously they sold out every seat. But I remember seeing, tweets back, when I was just starting my Spanish classes. So I had to get the translator out for pretty much every word there. But it was like, we came here for Messi, not for Inter. And I was like, I get that, but at the same time, that's the team that he's on. You don't want to see, even if they win, you're ready to leave when he gets subbed off, which is super rare anyway. It was just, I think there really is something about Miami fans. So I don't know exactly, what the plans are for the Miami FC down the road. Like I said, I really think that there is room enough for two clubs in Miami. I would love for all soccer teams to work out across this country because we need more growth, not less. But I have no idea how that's going to work down there, and I just don't get it. That's my take.
I have so many qualms about how like soccer in Miami has been handled, not just over the past like years or so, but like decades.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot to talk about. The Fort Lauderdale Strikers and Miami FC in NASL. Before they moved to NPSL and then USL and whatnot. Like there's a lot to break down there, and lots of mismanagement for sure as well. But I do agree with you. There's something about kind of how fans operate in Miami as well. It's I think slightly different than I'm not gonna say everywhere else. I think fans in general react more when the team is winning. I think generally, but I think it's certainly a bit more extreme in Miami. And I'm really, really curious to see what Inter Miami will look like as soon as the kind of, Messi who else did they sign? Jordi Alba. Like they're bringing in like half of the old Barcelona squad. As soon as those guys are out, what is that squad or what is that club and its relationship with the fans going to look like?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it's very promising. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like MLS's approach to bringing excitement around a new team is sign a big player. You saw it when Orlando moved to MLS. They had Kaká, and that helped them sell out stadiums like 60,000 people for several games in a row. And then after Kaká, when they weren't playing well, they kind of dropped off in attendance like really, really heavily. Obviously, you're not going to draw 60,000 people a game, but it was a pretty considerable drop off because once you lose that star and you're not winning, it's hard to keep that kind of jig going. And I think you're going to see something pretty similar with Inter Miami once all that falls off. Not to make this into like an MLS podcast, but it's tangentially related to the situation with Miami FC. And the fact check myself, Dalton Knutson is coming from South Georgia Tormenta from last season, but that was after 2 seasons with Union Omaha. So I wasn't totally wrong. I wasn't entirely making that up.
All right. Well, yeah, Carlos, I think that we have covered all of the USL news that we have for this week, but I do want to say please tune in as well to our RBLR Deportes show that's going each week as well. And I've already said this, it is helping me learn Spanish, but if you already speak Spanish, then it is just a good show for you. It covers all of the sports in Tampa Bay, and it does so, in a quicker period. So if you just want to get a good recap and they're in Spanish, then there you go. There is also a show in the RBLR Sports Network for the Tampa Bay Sun, the women's team coming up here. They will be holding tryouts in January. I know that because my sister is going to them. And if they don't hire her, I will, I'll be upset, but I'll probably obviously still have to be a fan of them.
Yeah.
Either way, tune into our show that talks about the Tampa Bay Sun, and we will have some information about that as it comes out. And thank you, listeners, now for tuning in. I know that we said we didn't have a lot to talk about, but Carlos, we made it almost an hour here. So apparently there was still plenty going on.
Look, the off season's slow for the Rowdies. But if you want to expand your mind a little bit, you take a look at what's happening around the USL. There is so much happening. It really is really interesting to see how this is all developing. Lots of interesting stuff. Like it's I think a testament to the USL with like how good these signings have been. There's so much more parity than there was just a few years ago in the Eastern Conference, especially. It's going to be fun. It's really going to be a fun season. Every game is going to get that much more challenging, though. So, I don't know. That being said, if you're the Rowdy front office and you're listening to this, go out and get a superstar. Please just like keep signing people. I don't know. Get us another goalie. I trust Phil Brano, don't get me wrong, but it feels scary to have one goalie on the roster right now.
Can't have just one.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, the point is USL is getting more and more competitive. The attendance is going up every year. The league is just looking good, James, for sure. I'm really, really excited to see what the next few years have in store.
Absolutely. And to track all of that, you can go to RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, anywhere at RBLR Sports. I'm also on Twitter at RBLR James K. Carlos, what about you?
At Carlos TPA10 on Twitter. Been tweeting a lot about Georgetown basketball. We're 0-3 to start conference play. Tweeting about that TikTok from South Korea talking about that Tampa sandwich shop. Go check that out. It's really, really funny. It's just really, really weird. Yeah, that's it. That's all that's going on my Twitter feed. Really, really fiending for some more Rowdies content. So please give us stuff to talk about. Side note, I tweeted out like 15 minutes before we started recording, James. Give us stuff to talk about. And of course, David Goldie, one of the Rowdies fans out in Scotland, was saying with the Robbie Nielsen connection to Hearts, is there a chance we sign Craig Gordon, 41-year-old goalkeeper at Hearts? Why not bring him? We need another goalie. I'm sure he would like the Sun. Super experienced guy. Bring him over.
Right now, we need another goalkeeper, and he is the most expensive goalkeeper, I think, in Premier League history still at this point. If I'm wrong, then fair enough, but he was at least for several years. So let's go do it. I love having Scottish players here. I think that Craig Gordon should be one of 10, but yeah, that would be cool. That is a very good suggestion. Well done to throw that out there. But yeah, please like and subscribe to our podcast as well. You can get the full experience on YouTube where you can see my freshly shaven face, which my wife says makes me look like a baby cop. And we are also on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, if you don't want to see my baby cop face. Either way, with another week down and another week closer to the start of the season, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.